Hi everyone, this is going to be a video on two-dimensional arrays. This is also multi-dimensional arrays, but for the sake of this class, we are just doing 2 dimensions. We're not going into 3 or more dimensions. So when we're doing 2 dimensions, right, it is basically kind of the same thing as when we did, if you do a one-dimensional array, we just get to have another set of data to go along with it. And so if you had in our previous class, we did parallel arrays where we had 2 arrays, one with player numbers, player names, and then their scores, and we kept it in 2 separate arrays, one-dimensional arrays. Now we could probably put similar information together in one and keep multiple and only have to keep track of one item in that. I always like to use Excel because that's how my brain pictures like the memory and how it saves data off and creates addresses and stuff for it. So if you're doing a one-dimensional array, I always think of it as a column in an Excel spreadsheet. So so if we had one that had names, so we'd have name sub-0, right? And we define it once, and then we'd get all the different elements by adding what number, right? What index we are in what element we are, we could get the 3 different values that we have. And if we were going to be adding things like, last name and city, we could add these too, and so we could create more variables and we could go through and we'd have to keep track of, which one the data is in, all of these, and we'd have 3 different variables that would be our one-dimensional arrays. So we could do this exact same thing now, but go into two-dimensional arrays. So we could save the same information, and we would do that by adding an extra block to it. So instead of having to define 3 different variables, we'd only define one variable, right? So we'd have it be our I'm just going to call it addresses. And so I'm going to call it A sub-0. And instead of just leaving it at that, we'd need, for this first column, it'd be A sub-0 sub-0, right? That's the first one. And then the next row would be A sub-1 sub-0. And then A sub-2 sub-0, right? And you go to the next one. So then this one, we could get the last name. We'd have to know like the next one is that, so it'd be A sub 0 sub 1. The next would be, we'd be A sub 1 sub 1, right? And then A sub 2 sub 1. So you can see, right, what I did here is this one, what I've increased all my values, right, is the first column, like the first thing goes, and so that's each row. So this is incrementing rows. The numbers down go increase, right? And this one, it's the second one. That's the column number. That's changing in the second one. And so that is increasing going down. So this third one would be, again, A sub 0 sub 2, A sub 1 sub 2, and A sub 2 sub 2, right? And so this is how it's going to be incrementing in each bit. So you can see, whereas this, I have my 3 values that I'm saving, but I have 3 different variables that I have to keep track of. Whereas this, I have the same 3 values saved, but I only had 1 variable I had to assign. Now, I have to specify that this only works if all of your data types are the same thing. That's the problem with these two-dimensional arrays, is that all the data types have to be strings or have to be the same data type. You can't mix and match. So you can't put like an integer in one and a string in the other and a float in the third, right? It has to all be strings. So if we go to our CLion and we go and start to actually code this, what it's going to look like is, right, and I'll start with our one-dimensional array, right? So string, and I need a standard, and we're going to make name, right? And we're just going to have this be 5. And again, there's multiple ways that we could fill this, so I will kind of do it in both. So this first one is if I just put it in the names, so Jen, Tina, and Brian. And then if I wanted to add more, right, name, sub, 3, right, because I have 3 things in there, but still the third element is 3, so that, and then Joseph, and then I'll do the last one for Lindy, right? Those are different ways that you could populate your array and add stuff to it. Now if we're going to do the same thing with our address book, so I'm going to call it addresses, and now I'm going to need multiple ones. Now one of the things that's really helpful to do, and this was a suggestion from Kira, is to add a to have variables for it. So what we're going to do is we're going to create variables of row and columns. And so what this is going to do is, right, I'm creating variables so that I remember which one, that this is a row, right, and this is a column. And we can go back into our Excel spreadsheet and see, right, the first one, the numbers are increasing as we go down in rows. The second one, the numbers are increasing as we go across in columns. So we're doing that. And so that'll help us just remember what these numbers are. And if we wanted to, we can make this a global, right? We could come here and make them a global. And global should be constants, right? Because they're not going to change. And so then I could come here and call row. All right, so now we've built it, and so we could assign values to it just like we did the previous one. So, right, if we want to do it this way, you're going to notice I'm going to open up a curly braces, and then I'm going to have another set of curly braces in here for each. So this will be the row, right? So it is going to be Jen, and I'm going to put, so I'm in Springfield, and we'll just do 2 for right now. And then, so that'll be it, right? And so then we're going to do the next one, which is Tina. And she's also in Springfield. And we'll do Brian, who's in Eugene. So I'm just defining 3 of them. So now if I want to get the other ones, right, I could also do that as addresses. And then this will be, right, sub 3, sub 0. We could have it be Joseph and addresses. Oh, I forgot this in my colon. Sub 3, sub 1, and that's going to be, he's in Monmouth. And then we could add Lindy, so addresses. Sub 4, sub 0 equals Lindy. And addresses, sub 4, sub 1. And she's in Eugene. Right, and so you can see here we've added in, and it's similar to this, but we only had to have one variable that we created, and then the system is keeping track of where it is. Whereas if we tried this here, right, we would have, if we wanted to do the same thing, string and city. So Springfield and Springfield and Eugene and Monmouth and Eugene. Right, so you can see we have the same thing, but here we had to create two different variables. And then if we want to print them, we have to manage the two different variables. Whereas this one, we got them all in one variable that we made, one two-dimensional array. And so if we wanted to print these, right, what we're going to do is create, right, we're going to need to use a for loop because we need to loop through each one of the elements of the array to print it out. So we're going to use for loops since we know how many items we have. For loops are the best ones for that. So we first initialize or create a variable and initialize it. So we're going to use I sub, and it always starts at 0, right? Element arrays start at 0 element, and then we have our less than that. We know we have we've completely filled it out, right? So we could use the how many rows we have, right? And then we could do I++, so this will cycle through all of the elements of our array, and that will get us the first number. We also need to do the second number, right? So this will get us which row we're on. Now we also need to get what column we're on. So we'll do for, and so we need another variable. We'll call this one j. And we'll do, well, j is less than col and j++. And so then we could go cycle through each one of our things, addresses, sub I, because right, that's the row, and sub j, that's the column. And we're just going to print that out, so cout. And we want some spaces just so we can easily read, and everything's not smushed together. And I don't want a paragraph because I want it to display where it puts it all on one line. So now we'll put the paragraph marker, right? And so this should print out our array. So I always like to click on the hammer and build it first and make sure that it works. And so that it compiled, and now we can hit play to make it run. And so now you can see it ran. So I have, you know, all of the different variables, like both columns. And I was able to do it all from just having one set of data. Now we go about passing the variable, the array into a function. I believe last week, right, so if I have a slide for it, where when you're passing an array into a function, you pass it in by the address location of whatever it's at. It's kind of like when we went back and we had, like if we made an array, right, we'll just say int calc area, just because for some reason that's where my brain goes. So we'll have width and height, right, and we're going to return w times height. Right, when we pass these variables in, what's happening is, right, if we go back to our lovely thing here, we're going to have our main, right? So these are all in main, right? Because that's where I define them. Main is up here. And then if I defined a variable width and height, right, and I put like 3 and 5 in here. And then I'm going to have this function, right, another scope, and this scope is going to be called calc area. And when I went and created pass these two items in, it passes them in, and it's going to create an address space here of width and height, or w and height, h, right? And so it's gonna copy that data from the 3 and the 5 and put the data here, 3 and 5. And so that is how that works, right? If that's passed by copy. What we want to do when you're passing in an array, you're not actually passing that. So what you're passing it in is we're going to do a void print array. And so we're going to do the string and my array. And I'm going to pass in the table or the array that we passed in. And when I do this, what I need to do is pass in, tell it some information about this array, because this is actually what we're doing is we're sending the address. So instead of sending, doing like we did here where we copied the data, what we're going to be doing is saying, oh, this is going to say, we're going to say this is in E3, right? This is saying my data now starts up here at E3 and it's using this data. So instead of copying new data, it's just saying, oh, go look at that data over here. And so what we need to do is, C++ doesn't care like how many rows you have. What it cares about is how wide you're going to be doing it. So it needs to know, it doesn't care how many down you go, it just only cares how wide you go. So what you have to do is tell it that, right, that we need how many columns that it has in it. It doesn't care, again, how many rows you have. Right, so when you're passing a 2D array, you must know the number of columns so it can move through memory correctly, so it knows how wide it goes, but it just knows that it repeats that pattern for how many rows you have. So this is how we pass it in, and you might need to say like how many items of it you're passing, but we're actually doing all of them, so we can do this, and then I'm going to come down and copy or take this code, right, and just bring it up there. And we're not doing addresses anymore, right? I called it a different name. And this is because this is like, it is going to say in our here, right, our my array, and it is in E3, right? So it's going to come up here and look at the data in this section to get my array. It is a good idea to use different names in your functions, so that way you know when things get changed. It's always for the human readability, not necessarily for the computer readability. And so this should work the same. We're going to come down here now and print it. Print array, and we're going to pass in addresses. And I'm just passing in the addresses here, you can see, and what I'm going to do before I do that, I'm going to print it out, cout, just so we can see what's in addresses. So when we compile this, right, what's in addresses you'll see is actually an address location. That is what it's saying here, is go look at this address location over here and find that data and use that as what we're passing into our array or into our function, and so that you could go through and cycle through that items. Like it wasn't by copy, right? So if we wanted to, we could change things, right? If I come down here and I go my array sub 0 sub 0, right? That's my name. I'm going to change it so because it's actually Jennifer, and then I'm going to have it print here, and then I'm just going to standard cout here, addresses sub 0 sub 0, and standard end all. I just like having end lines. And if I run this again, so we can see kind of what's happening, right? this was printing out what was in the table, and so it was Jen, and that was inside the function, and then after it printed it out again, and now it has it as Jennifer, because you are able to change the values because we're passing by address and not by the copy. So that's the basics on creating multidimensional arrays and passing those multidimensional arrays into functions. So I hope that helped, and have a great day.